So what I'm basically trying to prove here is, one, there is no homogeneous black Egypt, okay? Soldier boy, I been it. Why me crack it? Why me roll? Why me crack that soldier boy? That Superman? That why me? There is no homogeneous black Egypt, okay? And not in terms of it was all African peoples that developed pre-dynastic up into the late period Egypt, okay? That didn't happen. It wasn't only African peoples in this stretch of land, okay? That's just not true, all right? Two, black people in terms of North African people of various different skin tones were a significant part of the development of ancient Egypt. And then three, the definition of the term black from an American context isn't the most accurate sense of the word, because when you're not from America and you hear the term black, you think of extremely dark peoples. You don't think of, like, say, someone who looks like me, or I guess someone who may be even a little bit lighter than I, but we're also black, and we also consider ourselves black. Like, if I went to West Africa right now, most people probably wouldn't consider me black. I mean, they probably see my face and see my, phenotypical features and be like, yeah, you're probably a long lost cousin or something like that. But would they consider me black? Probably not. And I've talked with a few North Africans, and I said, hey, so if I look like this, where would you think I'm from? And they'd say places like, I don't know, Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt even. I've gotten to Egypt a couple of times. Not too many times, but a couple. Morocco. Did I say Algeria? Probably said Algeria. I don't remember. Anywho, point being is, there's more than one way to be black. I don't know how many times I got to say that. So we're going to go through this again, which I don't really want to. But I'm basically just going to prove that this whole page of bullshit is out of date and racist, and somebody on Wikipedia needs to edit it. If you want to read any of this shit yourself, you can obviously Google it and research it yourself. So yeah. So in pre-dynastic Egypt, most of it is from southern Egypt, okay? Like Wadi Halfa. Wadi Halfa is in Sudan, and this is like before Egypt was even a civilization. This is the oldest shit they can find in the Nile Valley region, okay? And it's 100,000 years old. Wadi Halfa. First thing, granted, I mean, archaeology is forever changing, but motherfucker is very difficult to find a lot of shit, okay? And then we have Alterian industry, which is basically like some it's like a Western Asian tool making technique that eventually reached Egypt. People say, and also I think it also came out of the Indus Valley as well. Maybe it was a bunch of shared, ideas throughout that region. So yeah, that reached Egypt around 4000 BC. And then we have the Khmer Musin. It's very difficult to pronounce some of these names. Industry, and they came out of, I believe, southern Egypt. Yeah, that's also southern Egypt, if I'm not mistaken. Hold on, let me click it. Yep, Sudan. So Mesolithic, we have more shit from southern Egypt, a few things from northern Egypt, and then when we get into Neolithic, which is the really interesting part, we get more settlements in northern Egypt, and we also have settlements in southern Egypt. But the settlements in southern Egypt are a little bit older, at least in terms of construction and dates, if I'm not mistaken, than the ones in northern Egypt. So yeah, so Nabta Playa, which I think is the oldest one, is 75,000 BC, and the oldest one in northern Egypt, 6,000 BC. Although the Fayum A culture, which is the lake in Upper Egypt, or excuse me, in Northern Egypt. I'm not gonna use Upper and Lower Egypt because that's just gonna get you. I'm just saying North, South because that's what we got. And I'm not gonna talk about why the northern part is called Lower Egypt, and the southern part is called Upper Egypt. The Nile flows south to north. Okay, that's why mainly. Okay. Anywho, they talk about how the culture existed from 9,000 BC to 6,000 BC. It's possible that they could have already had settled in the region, or they were beginning to settle in that region before 9,000 BC. So we have which culture? Yes, this is the one. This is the one. The Haifians, which it's weird because, okay, here's another thing with archaeology. Dating is very interesting how they date certain shit because mainly you have to use certain items that last a long time, and it's not always 100% accurate. So it's not a definitive date. It's more of a guesstimation, if you will. So these people existed around 8,800 BC to 8,000 BC, and they migrated out of Fayum. Which, I mean, hey, Fayum A is a period between 9,000, which is fairly close to 8,800 BC, but not exactly, to 6,000 BC. So, yeah. That's the only other culture, which is the Fayum A culture, that could possibly compete with Naphtali, okay? Which is literally the oldest, close to early dynastic Egyptian structure that we have. Okay, so we have more cultures in southern Egypt, like a lot more, and then we have, is it possible influence from Mesopotamia? Maybe. I mean, clearly, motherfuckers was trading, so it's not entirely out of the book. And look, this is Upper Egypt, right? This is literally. And Upper Egypt goes into Lower Kush, and Kush goes into Upper Kush, and all that other shit. So it's entirely possible that people from Mesopotamia just traveled along the water pathways and eventually reach Egypt. Like, it's not impossible in terms of what ancient peoples can do. So that's that. Most of pre-dynastic Egypt, most of it, not all of it, but most of it, comes out of southern Egypt. It comes out of Sudan and the area that would be known as Nubia, even though Nubia was technically a part of Egypt, at least in terms of ancient civilizations. Nubia is where most of Egyptian pharaohs gathered their gold. So Nubia was also a part of Kush. Kush was a little bit younger than Egypt in terms of, whatever a civilization is defined as. But they came out of the same peoples, or at least fairly similar peoples. At least in terms of the culture and the industries and ethnicities, all that shit. So I'm not saying that ancient Egypt was black, but I am saying that a lot of ancient Egypt came out of Sudan. Okay, Sudan got some really dark-skinned peoples in it, and that's just fact.
Now, one of the foundational stones for this hypothesis involves Sumerian cylinder seals that were found in ancient Egypt. Now, academia agrees that this was misconstrued, and so realistically, due to trade, those cylinder seals could have found their way into Egypt, or the Egyptians could have simply replicated them on their own. We know that contact in the ancient world was much more extensive than we originally thought it was. I think it's important to remember that ancient civilizations can influence each other, but realistically, there is not a Mesopotamian origin when it comes to ancient Egyptian civilization.
When we're talking about the Black Egyptian hypothesis, we have to understand that it is a reaction to the Hamitic hypothesis. You have to understand that when we look at the context of, because again, this is a Western point of view, when we look at the way that African history is taught and treated in the Western world, under the influence of the transatlantic slave trade and all of the racial caste system baggage that came with it, there was a lot of untruth told. So you have situations where, especially in the 20th century, Black Americans, Black Canadians, Black people in the West can now afford to travel to Egypt and Africa and actually see these places. And what we see in the statues is our own faces. So now the question becomes, well, what is the truth? They lied to us. Because usually when we look at depictions of Egyptians, especially in Hollywood, we have the focus on Cleopatra. We have the gods of Egypt. We have nearly every production, aside from the Prince of Egypt, which is one of my favorite films. Egyptians are generally portrayed as Europeans or very near to Europeans. But on the ground in Egypt, you go to Luxor, you go to Aswan, you go to Upper Egypt. That's not necessarily what is the truth for who is actually in Egypt. The Black Egyptian hypothesis is essentially a rejection of the Heidegger hypothesis, arguing that whether for the right or whether for the wrong, Egypt was a black civilization. We can look at the origins of Egypt and then have that debate and have that discussion. But I think it's very important to note that this is largely the African diaspora saying, hey, Western education has lied to us about Egypt and Africa's origins and our place in the world, arguing that we have no history. And so this is essentially the response to that. The idea that, well, you're saying Egypt was not black, or you're saying Egypt was all white or made by these dark-skinned Hamites, and our argument is those Hamites are black, because if they were around today, then those same Egyptians would be sitting at the back of the bus with the rest of us.
Early dynastic. Let's go. Look where most of the cities are. Look, we have the one popular city in Memphis. I mean, it's in the Delta. That's where a lot of food grows. I wouldn't be upset with anybody if they thought that this was the extent of where the power was being held. To have talk of cultural revolution, and then the first pharaoh, which I hate the term pharaoh. Let's just call those motherfuckers kings, because that's what the fuck they are. Pharaoh is a Greek word meaning great house, and I mean, a pharaoh isn't a person, it's a building. And it's not even pronounced pharaoh, it's pronounced per-ah. So yeah, that's early dynastic. We haven't even gotten to the pyramids yet. Oh, yeah, hold on, I forgot. Also, they had settlements in Palestine because colonialism. You know how ancient civilizations are. Okay, so Old Kingdom. We have the rise of the Old Kingdom. The first king of the Old Kingdom was Djoser, ruler of the third dynasty, which is interesting because what happened to the first two dynasties, and honestly there were probably dynasties before that, but they were early dynastic kings, and most of the names are too old to be taken out of the list of kings stele. Yeah, it's this shit right here. Lower Egypt, which is basically the Delta. We have this dude we don't really know. This is a bunch of unknowns. It's a bunch of unknowns. Like, we don't really know how to group these people. And then we have Upper Egypt, which is fairly... It's still not as much information about these people. And then we have pre-dynastic rulers. This is technically also pre-dynastic, but I guess this is pre-dynastic unified Egypt. Yeah, because Scorpion is the one who unified Egypt. So... yeah, I suppose. But these are more documented, because obviously writing improved under Scorpion, and Scorpion wanted to make sure, Scorpion/Narmer wanted to make sure that the shit lived on. And you see he's wearing the crown of southern Egypt, which is Sudan, Nubia, all that shit. And he's the one that conquered both and unified. They say unified, but really it was conquered, because, I mean, you can't really unify something without conquering some shit, at least in ancient times. I mean, shit, I guess even in modern times, that's kind of how bullshit works. So yeah, basically conquered Upper and Lower Egypt, so the Delta and Middle Egypt is along with Southern Egypt and Nubia and parts of Kush around 3150 BC. Arbitrary date, but hey, it is what it is. And so then we get to Horusbird, which we don't really have a real name, but yeah, Dozier, which is, yes, he's the first king of the Old Kingdom. The kingdoms are basically just names that Egyptologists and archaeologists use to classify different periods within ancient Egypt. First and second, kingdoms, not much. They have, some improvements on graves and writing. That's honestly, about it. I think they improved on some agricultural methods as well. Oh, he also built the first step pyramid, right? Yeah. Yeah, he built the first step pyramid at Saqqara. He was an advisor to Imhotep. Oh, wait, no. His visor was Imhotep. Not the dude from the Mummy, not that dude, but architect of the Old Kingdom. So, yeah. And so, yeah, at his height of his reign, there was this shit built. There was a temple also built in the same site of the pyramid, which honestly the pyramid is clearly just mastabas stacked on top of each other. Mastaba is basically just a grave for royal subjects. He built like what is it, like 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He built 6 on top of each other, and that's the first quote-unquote pyramid. Then we have, what happened to the 4th? Okay. Height of the Old Kingdom is the 4th dynasty. Really? Wait, what? We're not going to talk about the pyramids of Giza? Oh, here we go. The 4th dynasty is when they built the pyramids of Giza. I'm Shalipi, y'all. Forgive me. Again, this is all in Lower Egypt. Great Pyramid of Giza. We have Khafra, who built the 2nd largest. And then Djed de Khafra.
Djedefre.
Djed de Khaf.
Djedefre.
Djed Ifra.
Djedefre.
I think Khafra built the 2nd largest pyramid, and then Djedefre. That's such an interesting name. Built the smaller pyramid. And in traditional thinking, the Great Sphinx. Yeah, we still don't know how the fucking Sphinx was built, but a lot of people think it was Khafra who built it. But I mean, hey, recent examination evidence has led Egyptologist Vassal Dobrev to propose that the Sphinx had been built by the 3rd motherfucker as a monument to his father Khufu. Alternatively, the Sphinx has been proposed to be the work of Khafra and Khufu, which, I mean, hey, it looks like it could be a joint project. It's fairly old looking. Military expeditions in Canaan and Nubia. I mean, I hate the term. I feel like they selectively use terminology to make it seem like there's a certain narrative. Like, a military expedition back in ancient times was basically just motherfuckers exploring shit, and they wasn't trying to die, so they were packing the whole time. So it wasn't like they legit was like, all right, it's time for us to conquer Nubia and Canaan, which obviously they did not for multiple reasons, but they did trade shit with them, and that can be seen in the evidence. I'm guessing if you look at this military history, yeah, I'm pretty sure that motherfucker might explain some shit, and I'm pretty sure they had to fight some motherfuckers off too. So hey, it is what it is. 5th dynasty, and then decline to the first intermediate period. I think the first intermediate period, it had to do with there was like a famine or something like that. Hold on. They're in the 6th dynasty. The power of the pharaoh gradually weakened in favor of the monarchs. Yep, because there was a famine, right? However, the Nile flood control was still subject to very large works, including especially the canal to Lake Meroe around 23 BC, which was likely the source of water to the Giza pyramid complex centuries earlier. Internal disorders set in during the incredibly long reign of Pepi II towards the end of the dynasty. His death, certainly well past that of his intended heirs, might have created succession struggles. The country slipped into civil wars mere decades after the loss of Pepi II's reign. The final blow was the 2nd century drought. Okay, there it is. So it was a bunch of shit. Fucking infighting with the governors. Fucking flood control was on some bullshit, and then there was a drought, and then that led to political and economic collapse during that time. But of course, the art was fucking beautiful. I mean, look at this. look at this. That's pretty. I mean, they still need the, you know, they need a little help with the feet, and all the figures are like very static. But yeah. Now I'm sorry. Obviously, looking at this, you can't tell whether or not these people were African or not. But obviously, at some point, I'm pretty sure this probably was painted, probably red, and then the women were painted yellow because I forget. It has something to do with matriarchy. Their whole matriarchy mythology of Hathor, who was considered the there's a specific title. It escapes me at this time. But basically, she was basically just the mother goddess of all the pharaohs, at least in Old Kingdom times. I don't know how that panned out in Middle Kingdom, because Middle Kingdom isn't really that interesting, and it didn't last that long. But hey, we're going to get there in just a second. But also, look at the man features. He got a broad nose, big old lips, high cheekbones. This man black. That's what people would be saying. That's basically what they be saying. But yeah, I don't subscribe to shit like that. I mean, yeah, homie has a broad nose and big lips, but so does most people in North Africa. This man is probably just North African. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. We wanted to go to the first intermediate period because that is actually kind of interesting. 7th and 8th dynasties in Memphis. All right, here we go. The 7th and 8th dynasties are often overlooked because little is known about these rulers of these two periods. Manetho, a historian and priest from the Ptolemaic era, described 70 kings who ruled for 70 days. That's probably some bullshit. It's almost certainly an exaggeration, obviously, because that's what historians did. They weren't actually historians, they were more like storytellers. But anywho, the disorganization of the kingship during this time period, the 7th dynasty may have been an oligarchy. When are kings and monarchies not technically oligarchies? Comprising powerful rulers of the 6th dynasty based in Memphis who attempted to retain control of the country. 8th dynasty rulers claiming to be descendants of the 6th dynasty kings and also ruled Memphis. Little is known about these two dynasties. Very little textual or archaeological evidence survives to describe this period. However, a few artifacts have been found, including scarabs that have been attributed to King Neferkare II of the 7th dynasty, as well as a green jasper cylinder of Syrian influence. Why can't they just whatever say Syrian? But Syrian is a modern political thing, whatever. Anywho, which has been accredited to the 8th dynasty. Also, a small pyramid believed to have been constructed during the time of King Ibi of the 8th dynasty, and has been identified at Saqqara. Several kings, such as Itinu, I hope that's how you pronounce your name, sorry if I'm getting it wrong, are attested once, and their position remains unknown. So basically, it's just time of political turmoil.